The biggest disappointment about this game is the fact that it doesn't give itself the chance to continue the story and lore of the world created by Ready at Dawn.
I'm as good as dead already.
I've never played a game that has so much potential and is so close to being a masterpiece but falls short with many questionable gameplay and storytelling decisions. And just to be clear, I actually really enjoyed my time with this game. I don't think it deserves all the hate it gets, but I have a feeling a lot of my criticism will align and have already been said with the glaringly obvious and basic mistakes that are made throughout the experience. So, The Order 1886 is set in an alternative history steampunk London. The game follows the legendary Knights of the Round Table as they battle to keep the world safe from half-breeds such as werewolves and vampires, as well as fringe organisations rebelling against the government. You play as Galahad as he starts to uncover the truth behind the conspiracy that is closer to home than first thought. Now, jumping right in, my first issue with this game is its pacing, as the game is very slow to get going and the choice of cutscenes make no sense. For example, uh, they have moments where there are pointless cutscenes basically, which then turn into gameplay and then quick time events. The problem with these moments is that they are so short, they might as well just be long cutscenes. Now, the way that they transition from the cutscenes to gameplay is perfect and seamless, but they choose to implement it uh, weird at weird times with no real fault for the player. It's like they just wanted to make an interactive movie, and as a result, the pacing suffers. Part of the issue is that they try to make the game really cinematic, but in doing so, they make it hard for for gamers to follow, as they have gameplay that should just be cutscenes, and cutscenes that should be gameplay, and there doesn't seem to be much of a balance. For example, there's literally one bit where it plays a cutscene and then makes you walk 400 yards and then plays another cutscene. Why not just have one long cutscene and then longer periods of gameplay? I don't know. However, I enjoyed the actual story and the structure of the plot. It made for a very interesting world which was helped by the mix of horror and action elements that make the campaign diverse and interesting. The inclusion of werewolves and vampires was also a nice change from the typical zombie type enemies that you get nowadays, and I actually felt grounded in terms of believability. So I want to skip straight to gameplay because that's where I feel this game has the issues. I think the story is fine and I like the story. Now, the gameplay is a mixed bag with quite a lot of good but also quite a lot of questionable choices. For example, the first one I want to touch on is that the fact that you can only interact with things in the world when prompted, so the game loses any element of agency. And to add to this, the stuff you do pick up is just random stuff that has no purpose or relatability to the story, apart from the odd voice recording, which needs to be played in the menu for some reason. So I didn't even bother playing them half the time. It just stopped the flow. You also can't find ammo or anything else in the drawers that you kind of look at, so there's literally no point in exploring the areas that this game does allow you to actually explore. And it just feels like the game is constantly holding your hand, telling you where to go and what to do. My next issue with the gameplay is the lack of agency in combat. I wish there were more gameplay options. For example, there's a really cool and satisfying hand-to-hand combat moment with a knife in this game. I think it's actually a boss fight, but you literally only do it twice. And you can't even use the knife when playing the game normally, which I just think is really strange. Um, I just think the game would have benefited from having an intro that takes you through all the gameplay features and then lets you use them when you want and not just when the game decides to let you to use them, because what you end up with is an 80% cover shooter experience and a 20% of one-off experiences, which are actually the most memorable moments. It needed more moments that offer the player agency to be able to play how they want instead of being forced to use certain weapons at certain times and forced to walk through repetitive gameplay moments. For example, at the start, the bits with the werewolves are like literally the best part of the game. They're really interesting and the gameplay's interesting, but they're hardly in the game. And then once the game goes on and you see the werewolves again and then again, you start to see why they're not in it much, because the AI for them is horrible. They literally run in the same pattern until you kill them. So they'll hit you and then they'll run away and then they'll start in exactly the same position and then hit you and run away, and it's baffling. I don't understand why they didn't put more work in. It's really disappointing because there's so much they could have done with the werewolves, which would have made these moments more kind of challenging and rewarding. But instead, they're just basic enemies with no real threat. The human enemies are slightly harder to kill, but even then, they're just not that smart, and the balance is just all over the place. As there's one enemy type in this game that is impossible to kill if you have certain weapons. Now, the problem with this is you're probably thinking, well, just pick a different weapon. Well, you literally can't, because the game forces you to use certain weapons at certain points, which is all. It's just really like strange moments like that. Like sometimes you can use whatever weapon you want, and in other moments you have to use certain weapons because the game's telling you to, instead of being able to just use what you want. So yeah, I guess that's another downfall to this game. There's also a really fun stealth mission, but there's no option to actually do this in game. Like, there's no way to be stealthy in game. You have to just kind of run and gun and basically do the cover system. Although it's not too bad because the gunplay is satisfying and feels good, and is kind of, the character animation is also really well done. So when you're walking around and stuff, it feels really smooth and it feels like you're playing like a AAA game. The problem is, though, with this whole review is that what I'm talking about here, I'm talking about the here and now, and if you should pick up this game for a much cheaper price, like I paid £5 for it and had a blast, so I definitely recommend playing it. But like I said, it's an experience that should have been a lot better, and you can feel that when playing. However, I see why people hate this game, as Sony did charge £60 for it, which, people go on about the length. I don't think the length was actually an issue. I don't mind short games and I don't mind long games. For me, the important thing is that the storytelling is good and the gameplay is good. Like I said, the length isn't an issue in my book, as long as it's cohesive and it feels like it's a good experience after you completed it. I think that's the main point, and I think that is where people are coming from. So for me, it's all the other bits I've mentioned, and the sad reality is that it's a game that could have been so easily a 10 out of 10, but I guess they just, I don't know, ran out of budget or spent all their money on the presentation because the graphics look amazing. I thought it can't be that bad. Like when I remember watching the first trailer for it, and I remember being like, "Oh, this looks amazing! Like, what's everyone moaning about? It looks really good," and I was just blown away. I guess that makes sense now because that was like, this game is perfect for an E3 showcase, and I think that's the issue. They did so well with kind of the graphics and making it look amazing and making all the character designs really good, but I guess they forgot the most important part, which is the gameplay and giving the player some sense of agency. But I still 100% recommend you play this game. I'd love for there to be a sequel one day. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately, but I definitely think it's worth playing. I was pleasantly surprised with it, but also quite disappointed, just because there's so many baffling decisions, like I've mentioned, and they just let themselves down. This is by far the weirdest experience I've had with a video game, because the first kind of 10 minutes or so, you're like, wow, this is going to be incredible. And then these little details start creeping in, and you're like, okay, this is weird. Why did they do this? So I think, for me anyway, Ready at Dawn deserve a chance to make a sequel to The Order 1886, and just to put all those things that were bad right. And I think they will easily have a game that is, 9s, 10 out of 10s. But for now, unfortunately, this is what we have. But anyway, like I said, definitely play this game if you get the chance. It's only about 6 or 7 hours long, so it shouldn't take up much of your time, and the story is engaging. But that's all for now. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Strange.